Back in 2016, TikTok didn't exist in the US as we know it today. By 2020, it had become one of the fastest-growing social platforms in the world. And by 2024, over 170 million Americans were scrolling, creating, and connecting through an app owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance. But today, in 2025, TikTok is facing a government-mandated ban. Lawmakers cite national security, data privacy, influence on the youth, and the concern that the Chinese government could manipulate or access the data of US citizens. But let's stop and ask, what does this really mean? Because banning TikTok isn't just about what happens on a phone screen. It's about the deeper tension between two of the world's biggest powers. This is about more than an app. It's about control, influence, and the future of global technology. Let's break it down. The US says the ban is about protecting Americans from foreign surveillance. Officials argue that any Chinese-owned platform is ultimately answerable to Beijing. Under China's laws, the government can demand access to company data. That's the root of the fear. Not what TikTok is doing now, but what it could do in the future. They ask, what if the algorithm starts quietly pushing certain narratives? What if personal data ends up in the hands of Chinese intelligence? What if the US becomes more culturally influenced by a foreign power without even realizing it? On the surface, these are valid concerns. But here's where it gets interesting. When the United States takes action against a foreign company, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. The rest of the world is watching. And in this case, China sees much more than a security move. They see strategy, they see an economic challenge, and they see an attempt to hold back their rise in the global tech scene. From Beijing's perspective, the TikTok ban is less about safety and more about control. Let's take a step back. For decades, China has watched as American companies dominated the digital world. Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple. These tech giants expanded into every corner of the globe, becoming not just businesses, but cultural powerhouses. And for years, China kept them at arm's length, banning or heavily restricting their presence inside the country. Why? Because they believed letting these platforms in meant handing over too much influence, too much access to data, too much say in shaping what people see and believe. So when TikTok became the first Chinese app to break into Western markets and dominate, growing faster than any US-based competitor, it was a big moment. It wasn't just a win for ByteDance. It was a signal that China could compete in the digital world on a global stage. Now, the US wants to force a sale or shut it down entirely. To China, this feels like a double standard. After all, American companies operate across the world with massive reach and data access. But when China produces a hit platform, suddenly it's a national threat. That narrative plays well in Beijing. It supports the long-held belief that the US doesn't really want fair competition. It wants control. It wants to remain the gatekeeper of the global internet. And when something threatens that dominance, even a short-form video app, the US will do whatever it takes to bring it under its own roof. That belief is what makes this so personal. Because it's not just about TikTok. It's about every other Chinese company with ambitions to go global. If ByteDance is forced to sell its most valuable asset to an American buyer, other Chinese tech firms will think twice before trying to expand into US territory. They'll worry that the same thing could happen to them, that no matter how successful they become, their future could be taken with the stroke of a pen. That fear changes how Chinese companies grow. It pushes them to focus more on countries that are less politically risky. It deepens ties with places like Russia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. It also fuels the development of China's own parallel internet, a digital world with its own platforms, its own payment systems, and eventually, its own rules. Now, here's the part that's easy to miss. This isn't just about governments. Chinese citizens are paying attention too. Millions of them use American apps through VPNs. They follow Western influencers. They shop on Amazon. They stream on Netflix. When the US bans TikTok, many see it not as protection, but as hypocrisy. To them, the US preaches openness and free markets until the competition gets too real. And it doesn't help that American lawmakers often struggle to explain how TikTok works or why it's dangerous. When pressed in hearings, many couldn't answer simple questions about data flow or algorithm behavior. To outside observers, that doesn't look like leadership. It looks like panic. Now, I'm not saying China is a victim here. The Chinese government has its own strict rules about foreign companies. But in this power struggle, both sides are drawing lines. And each move pushes us closer to a world where the internet is no longer shared, but split. Carved up by ideology, by law, and by fear. Let's look at real-world impact. Huawei, another Chinese tech giant, was once on track to dominate 5G networks around the world. Then came US sanctions. Suddenly, Huawei lost access to key American technologies. The company shrank. Countries pulled back. The message was clear. If your company gets too close to critical systems and you're based in China, the US will push back, hard. Now that same model is being applied to TikTok, and other companies are watching closely. ByteDance has already tried to compromise. It opened data centers in the US. It proposed third-party audits. It offered transparency initiatives. But for many in Washington, none of it is enough, because the core issue isn't where the data is stored. It's who ultimately owns the app. That's why this story is so much bigger than people think. It's not just about banning a social media app. It's about decoupling, a slow, steady separation of the two biggest economies in the world. One policy at a time, one company at a time. Next, we'll break down what this means for the future of content, creators, and everyday users. When people hear about TikTok getting banned, they often imagine politicians making high-level decisions or business executives cutting deals. But the people who feel the impact first and deepest are regular users. Millions of creators have built their careers on TikTok. Not just influencers with millions of followers, but small business owners, teachers, comedians, musicians, and side hustlers. They've found community, attention, and income on a platform they didn't build but trusted. So what happens to all of them if TikTok is taken away? Let's take a real-world example. A woman in Atlanta sells handmade jewelry. She built a customer base entirely through TikTok. She doesn't have a website. She doesn't run Facebook ads. She posts videos of her creative process, answers customer questions, and watches the orders roll in. If the platform disappears, so does her storefront. And it's not just one woman. It's thousands of people like her. In a world where traditional jobs are becoming more automated, remote, or competitive, platforms like TikTok gave people new ways to earn. It democratized visibility. You didn't need connections or an agency. If your content resonated, you grew. So the ban doesn't just remove an app, it removes access. And in many cases, it removes income. Now think bigger. TikTok helped shape internet culture over the last 5 years. The way people edit videos, the sounds we hear in the background of trending clips, the challenges, the dances, even the way we learn new things, bite-sized, rapid, visual, was influenced by this platform. When one country bans a platform that popular, it sets a tone. Other countries start asking, should we do the same? Should we also regulate the digital spaces where people spend their time? What content gets allowed? What content gets filtered? We start drifting from an open internet to a fragmented one, where people in different countries see totally different versions of reality, not just because of language or geography, but because of policy. And here's the irony. Many of the same politicians worried about misinformation on TikTok are perfectly fine with misinformation on other platforms. They're less concerned when it's coming from sources they can influence. That's where things get blurry. Because this isn't just a tech issue, it's a cultural one. The content that goes viral reflects our values. It spreads trends. It shapes opinions. So when a foreign platform becomes the main place young people go for news, jokes, and social interaction, it challenges domestic influence. That's why the stakes are so high. This isn't just a trade war, it's a content war, a battle for attention. And attention is the new currency. Whoever holds it shapes the future. Let's go back to China for a second. Their version of TikTok, called Douyin, is completely different from what Americans experience. It's designed to promote educational content, national pride, and safe usage among youth. The app cuts off after 40 minutes a day for kids. It curates content differently. Meanwhile, in the US, TikTok is full of everything, from dance challenges to political debates, conspiracy theories to mental health tips. There's beauty in the chaos, but also risk. So the question becomes, if we ban TikTok here, do we replace it with something better? Or do we just push people toward more controlled platforms, where algorithms are just as powerful, but less transparent? And what happens to the next generation of platforms? If you're a tech founder in India, Brazil, or Africa, trying to build a global app, what does this signal to you? It tells you that even if you build something amazing, politics could stop it from reaching the world. That discourages innovation. It reinforces the power of already dominant American tech giants. Let me pause here. Curtis here, and I know this is a lot, but these are the conversations we need to have, because the people who are most affected by these bans, they're not in Congress, they're not in boardrooms, they're you and me. They're creators, freelancers, dreamers, trying to build something real on a digital stage. If you haven't already, this is a good moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. We're peeling back the layers on power, policy, and technology without the fluff. Next, we'll explore what the future looks like. What comes after TikTok? Is there a way forward where tech and trust can actually exist together? And what role can everyday people play in shaping that future? So the US moves forward with a ban on TikTok, or maybe they force a sale. Either way, the platform, at least as it currently exists, is changed. But the question that matters now is, what happens after? Because removing an app doesn't erase the issues. It doesn't fix the tension. And it definitely doesn't stop the power struggle between the US and China. In fact, it accelerates it. When TikTok is removed from the picture, creators scatter. Some jump to Instagram Reels, others move to YouTube Shorts. A few try newer platforms, but none of them fully replace what TikTok offered. The algorithm was different. The reach was more organic. The culture was unique. It's like trying to replace a community. You can't just move it somewhere else and expect it to feel the same. But beyond that, the deeper challenge is trust. This moment forces people to question who really controls the internet. Is it governments? Is it tech companies? Is it users? The idea that the web was once free and open now feels more like a memory. In this new reality, the internet is split into digital zones: US, China, Europe, and others, all building their own walls, their own standards, their own platforms. And as those divisions grow, collaboration fades. We're not just talking about apps anymore. We're talking about the future of communication, innovation, and influence. Let's go back to the US for a moment. After banning TikTok, the US faces pressure to provide a clear alternative, not just for entertainment, but for opportunity. Because TikTok wasn't just fun, it was functional. It gave people a voice. It launched brands. It challenged the dominance of big tech. So, the US needs to ask itself, what kind of digital world are we creating? One where people have more choices? Or one where the biggest platforms keep getting bigger simply because they're American? If we care about innovation, the answer can't just be ban foreign apps. It has to be build better ones. And for China, the ban confirms what they suspected, that the global stage is never truly neutral. That when a Chinese company reaches the top, it's treated differently. That politics can override product. That lesson won't go away. It will push China to double down on self-reliance, to invest more in homegrown platforms, to push their own digital currency, their own cloud systems, their own infrastructure, and export them to other countries. And many of those countries will welcome it. Because when the US limits access to its platforms, other nations start looking for alternatives. That opens the door for China to say, we have our own internet, our own servers, our own apps. Use them instead. This is how influence shifts, slowly at first, and then all at once. Let's talk about global businesses. Multinational companies now face a decision. Which side of the digital divide will they stand on? Do they cater to the US, comply with data demands, and play it safe? Or do they expand into China's sphere, with different rules, different risks, and massive potential reach? That decision won't be easy, because the world is moving toward two competing tech ecosystems, and businesses will need to pick one, or figure out how to operate in both without stepping on geopolitical landmines. Now here's where it comes back to all of us. Curtis here again, and I want to ask you something. What kind of internet do you want to live in? One where fear drives decisions? Or one where we can balance innovation and safety? One where governments choose which voices get heard? Or one where people still have a say? Because no matter where you stand on the TikTok ban, the bigger question is still open. How do we keep the internet free, fair, and built for the people who actually use it? If we don't answer that soon, we'll lose more than an app. We'll lose what the internet was meant to be in the first place, a tool for connection, not control. So what comes next? We stay informed. We ask hard questions. We push for policies that protect users, not just interests. And we build platforms that actually deserve our trust. Thank you for sticking with me through this series. If you found this valuable, take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I've got more content coming your way that unpacks what's really happening behind the headlines. Until next time, be smart, stay informed, and never stop thinking for yourself.